Hello everyone, this is David from Patriot Training Center, or PTC Armory. I was asked today to talk to you guys a little bit about iron sights in comparison to a telescopic sight, or what is commonly referred to as a rifle scope. And some of the different, and hopefully not stating the obvious, but the differences and maybe the pros and cons of having access to or utilizing one over the other. Let me focus initially on the iron-sighted system. Back in the mid-90s when I actually started as a young sniper, and my role was as sniper observer, and the weapon that I was assigned and the one that I deployed with and trained with was an old Colt H-bar, and the only sights that I had available to me were iron sights, and that was, I think, somewhat by design and on purpose, but it also was just what we had available to us at the time. The iron sights and what I will say is very similar to your pistol sighting system, or we could argue, a shotgun, things of that nature, is the limitations are, of course, that when you are looking at a target and you intend to put rounds on a given target, the general rule of thumb is that you orient your front post or blade or whatever that is in the rear, whether it be an aperture, of whatever size, or a dovetail of sorts, or whatever the case may be, and you align those two things, and then as you put them on your target, the idea generally, or the rule of thumb, is that you start to focus on that front sight as you're pressing the trigger, and you hope to not disturb anything and keep things, again, aligned and oriented as perfectly as you possibly can. The limitations are that, first of all, if you don't have a lot of muscle memory, if you don't have a lot of time with that particular rifle, and your cheek weld isn't exactly the same every time, if your eyes, as you get older, for sure, they start to change and they're not quite as acute or as accurate as they used to be, they don't see as sharply, then that can all affect your ability to see, and so therefore to put accurate fire again on your target, whether it's a bullseye, a silhouette, an animal if you're a hunter, whatever the case may be. And so that makes things very, very tough. Maybe we could argue maybe one of the pros, or a good thing about shooting iron sights, is first of all the principles and practicing a lot, the basics, getting right down to the basics, does give the shooter an opportunity to practice a lot. And the durability, as a general rule, iron sights are very, very durable. They're very, very low profile. You don't have a big thing, a piece of equipment or gear or kit, hanging up here, as you would with a rifle scope, for example. So those are good things. I will say from my experience that if you are shooting any position other than an extremely stable prone or off of a bench, something where your position is very, very stable, shooting iron sights, you don't see that natural arc of movement, or a lot of people say the wobble that a shooter does, that's just part of shooting in general, that happens when you get off your belly or when you get off the bench. Those types of things, that arc of movement, or as your sight is moving around on the target, it's just part of being a human being, and depending on your fitness and so on and so forth, that's just going to happen. With iron sights or very low magnification, that is very diminished, and so therefore, mentally, as you're pressing the shot, you can feel like, yeah, my sights are on target, so I should just press. It makes that process a little bit easier. So those are some of the good things. The adjustments, again, on an AR-15, typically windage is affected by the rear sight, and your elevation is affected by the front post. And those things, the adjustments are a lot more coarse, or generally more coarse, than, again, with a rifle scope. And so as you are making those adjustments, again, if you have a rifle that's extremely precise, very, very accurate and capable, those adjustments, you may overshoot it, you may not go enough, and it's a little bit more of a trial and error with iron sights as a general rule. So again, just sharing some of my experience, some of my opinions on the subject. I still like to shoot with iron sight systems on occasion, just to stay in practice, I guess, and just to kind of get back to the basics. But if if you were trying to get the most out of your gun, that would be one of the other things that I would bring up, is that if you have a rifle that is sub-minute and it's capable of doing that on a regular basis, just because you only shoot iron sights, it doesn't take away from the rifle's potential. If it's a sub-minute rifle, it will do it with iron sights, but I will say that it will probably be much more difficult. It'll be, yeah, just a harder thing to accomplish, and certainly to be able to do repeatedly with an iron-sighted system. But again, it doesn't take away from the inherent value or accuracy of this rifle. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about having access to a rifle scope or a telescopic sight, something that nowadays has usually quite a bit of magnification, not always, and I will discuss briefly that even if you were to mount something with a fixed power or fixed magnification to it, and it wasn't very high, you know, 2, 4, 6, 8, you know, one of those that they're still out there, that in and of itself would be a huge benefit, and let me discuss why. First of all, with a rifle scope, just by the nature of the way they are designed, and most of them, you know, this is a very high-end Night Force, but it would apply to most of the rifle scopes out there, even those that are maybe geared more towards hunting applications. But most of them have, in the rear ocular lens here, you have the ability to focus this eyepiece, or focus the crosshairs, or what we usually refer to as a reticle, to your eye. So for me, that's, you know, in my mid to late 50s now, and my eyes are getting tired and my vision isn't what it used to be, I'm not handicapped by my vision being tired or not as good as it used to be, because I can focus this piece of the scope so that the crosshairs in here look extremely sharp and very, very good to me. The other thing that rifle scopes have available to them, and that's just, again, part of the features, is that they have, you know, elevation and windage adjustment that is again, these are finger adjustable. They're taller. You know, this is a tactically oriented scope, and so therefore, you know, I don't have to remove a cap. I don't have to do anything of that nature to be able to access the adjustments on this particular rifle scope. But along the lines of elevation and windage adjustment, most rifle scopes, the adjustments per movement or per click that we often hear is much more precise. It's a finer adjustment. So again, if I have a rifle that is capable of let's say, like some of my centerfire bolt guns that are capable of half a minute, or maybe even slightly better, close to a quarter minute, and I shoot a 3-shot group on paper or at my target, and I realize, okay, I now need to move, you know, 2 inches low and 2 inches to the right, I can make those adjustments, and they will be very, very precise, and I will get that next group to be pretty darn close to exactly where I would like to be. So that's a very, very good, that's a nice benefit. And then on most of the modern scopes, certainly on the higher end rifle scopes that we find out there, they will have what we refer to as parallax adjustment. And this parallax feature, without going into the weeds or getting into great detail on parallax and what that means, the definition of it, it is now, again, that opportunity to put your eye, you know, what your eye is able to see, and the reticle or crosshairs or whatever it looks like inside of this rifle scope, and your target downrange, whether it be 100, 200, 500, 1,000, all again on the same plane. Everything is crystal clear, and everything is at the same position, so that when you break that shot and you do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 times, that you're seeing the same thing every time. And that is what this parallax, some people, you know, back in the olden days, we used to sometimes refer to it as a side focus knob, but truly it's not exactly that. Some of the older vintagey, especially hunting rifle scopes, and some of the old target, you know, scopes used to have an adjustable objective where you would focus it on this objective lens on the bell here. You would be able to move it back and forth, and it would range, you know, from, let's say, you know, 25 or 50 yards all the way up to infinity. So those are great things. Some of the things to be aware of, again, with a rifle scope, is the durability. You know, you do get what you pay for. So you know, if you put $150 you know, I won't name brands, but scope on your rifle and it falls out of the bed of the truck, or you have it propped, you know, vertically and it falls over, there's a potential for now that rifle scope to have been, you know, jarred or moved, or the internals to be affected in such a way that now you're not zeroed anymore. And so it would be very wise to go and double check that before you do anything important with it. The higher end scopes are much more durable, much more capable of being out in the elements, of being knocked around, of, you know, going from extreme cold to hot temperatures, and so on and so forth, and surviving that. Obviously, with a telescopic sight, you need some type of mounting system to join this to your gun. There's a million different variations. There's lots of companies out there, and that's, you know, that's just one of the things to be aware of. And then, of course, the footprint. You know, what you see here, as opposed to the iron-sighted AR-15 that I was holding just a little bit ago, there is more mass, there's more bulk, there's more things to be aware of when you're moving around, and to protect it, whether it be in a case or just as you have it on your person. So those are some of the things. I will say, going back to that last thing that I mentioned with the iron-sighted AR-15, is that now, again, going back to the example, if I have a rifle that is capable of shooting 1 minute of angle or better, and I can do it time after time after time, to be able to do that with a rifle scope is going to be a lot better, you know, a lot easier on me and a lot more repeatable. And that's always, again, that's a huge positive, to be able to get all the performance and all the inherent performance out of your rifle, because you have a good quality scope to be able to see through and to aim with. Okay, let me talk briefly about, again, that putting all of your target and your sight, you know, your reticle or crosshair, and the way your eye sees those things on one plane, or they're all coming into focus and they're all being able to be seen very clearly and crisply at the same time, versus with an iron sight, you can only focus on one thing. Your eye is only able to do that. So again, if you're doing it correctly with an iron sight, after you get everything aligned and oriented, and you're ready to make the shot, you know, you should be focusing on the front post of that iron sight system. And so therefore, now the rear aperture is fuzzy or out of focus, and your target is also out of focus. And you can imagine, if that target is now multiple hundreds of yards away, man, you're hoping, and a lot of times as a shooter, your eye will bounce, you know, back to the target, back to the front post, back to the rear sight, you know, trying to make sure that everything's good, you haven't disturbed anything before you break that shot. But ultimately, everything is fuzzy except for that one thing, which again usually is your front sight or your front post, and as you break that shot. With the rifle scope, yeah, the beauty of it is that everything is in focus. You can see very clearly if you choose, you know, let's say on a paper target that shows a man's image, you know, and you see like this shirt, you know, a button, and you decide, I'm going to focus on this button on that target, and I'm going to put my crosshairs there. It's crystal clear. And as you're looking at the crosshairs, again, they are crystal clear. They're very sharp. And you can do all that and maintain it and hold it as you're pressing the shot. And it doesn't have to be bouncing, your eye bouncing back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And that happens, again, from as close as, you know, 25 yards or whatever, you know, if you're shooting outside, out to 1,000 yards plus, if you have targets that are available to you that far away. So yeah, a huge benefit, probably the biggest benefit of the difference between the two. Okay, so these are just some of my opinions and my experience. It's been a while, you know, many years ago when I was doing this professionally, but again, these are some of my opinions and my thoughts. We know that there are many ways to skin a cat, and certainly we'd love to hear from you guys. You know, if you have some real experience in shooting iron sights. I know all the service rifle competitors out there, certainly back in the day, that's all they shoot, and they do extremely well at some pretty good distances, you know, ranges, with that type of a shooting system. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you, and hopefully you got some value out of this few minutes of discussing.